So in this demo, you'd be watching the steps of deploying Hortonworks HDP 2.2.4 as a single node pseudo-distributed mode using Apache Ambari 2.0, which is recently got released up from Apache Software Foundation. So we'd be going through the demo steps that how to deploy Apache Ambari with help of Apache Ambari, how to deploy HDP 2.2.4, which has got pretty new exciting features, and we can perform the demo steps over AWS EC2 clusters as well. But for this demo, we will be walking through Azure VM, that's Azure Microsoft Azure Virtual Machines, and we'll be going through the steps over Microsoft Azure VMs. So what I've done here, I'm already inside my Azure portal and just gone through the steps of provisioning a new VM. So for this demo, I'm taking an 8-core system, that's an A4 CentOS cluster, and I'm going ahead to provide the endpoints. So I have provided the SSH endpoint, HTTP specifically to specify the port number, that's 8080, and also I can provide the port number for remote desktop I can assign, and if needed I can also provide the port number for HTTPS. That's all, but make sure that you have assigned 8080 as a public port in your HTTP endpoint so that you could be able to access Ambari server directly from your local system. So of course, so I'm making the regions Affinity Group virtual network, just making the default location. And if you are getting an issue with the cloud service name anytime during provisioning cloud service, so make sure that you can make it manageable, and after that just click on the checkbox that install VM agent so that it would go ahead and install the VM agent to manage the extension that could help you to interact with the VM agent. It cannot be disabled, of course, when deploying from a Linux image. So next, click on the tick icon to start deploying the virtual machine on Azure. So make sure that I'm working here, since it's a single node HDP distribution, so I'm deploying it on a A4 core VM on Azure. So if you're planning to deploy Hortonworks HDP cluster, that's of course if it is 2.0 or 2.1 or 2.2, make sure that if it is a single node cluster, it should be either a large or extra large instance. That means A4, A3 would be fine, but A4, A5 would be recommended. So let's just start about the steps. So since it's going to be a single node cluster, so just one cluster would be fine, one VM would be great to start with. So we can start with the VM. Once the VM got provisioned, you can start work with the VM. So the VM is getting booted.
Good.
Alright, so the VM is successfully running. Let's connect with the VM. Alright, so we have been connected to the HDP Ambari VM, which is running in Microsoft Azure Data Center. So right now, once we have been connected to the VM instance in Azure, let's prep the instance for deployment of Apache Ambari and then finally the deployment of HTTP. So in order to deploy Apache Ambari, the steps that we need to perform, since this is a CentOS 6.5 64-bit Linux cluster, so here is few of the steps, few of the components that you need to configure. First thing that you need to configure is this one, chk config ntpd on. Next step, we need to configure chk config IP tables off. So if you're getting any permission issues over there, just make sure that you need to do this using sudo. Once you have done on that, just make sure doing tc initd slash IP tables off. So the valid options are start, stop, reload, restart. So just make sure, just make it stop. So sudo initd IP tables stop would be there. And once you have configured on that, just make sure you need to start the service of NTPD once again. So that's the only prep that we need. So next we are going to create some of the steps that for passwordless SSH authentications and all. So what I need to do next is basically for single node clustering, there is no more VM, just only the single VM, but make sure that a VM is capable enough to holding all the instances and all the configurations for single node configuration for HDFS, MapReduce, all of the specific services for HDP like Pig, Hive, Falcon, Scope, Flume, Spark, Storm, Kafka, etc. So what I do to next is basically, let's come out from the VM and just type cp make sure that your key file is present within the local directory from where you were doing this operation. HTTP user, just paste this. So make sure to generate the SSH key in this command. So next we need to move this private key to the SSH folder, .ssh folder, and we need to rename it to id_rsa. So what are the steps by which we could be able to do that? So next what we need to do is basically just connect once again to the HDP Ambari Cloud VM, and once you have connected, just go ahead and config. So once you have done that, so you'll be able to see that your Hadoop VM.key is present within this cluster. And now what you need to do is basically just make sure your .ssh folder is existing, the directory. Once it's existing, just you need to move the key, that's Hadoop VM.key, within this directory. And so once you have done all of this, if you're doing this same configurations like multi-node configurations, multi-node clustering for HDP, for Hortonworks HDP, for on Cloud VM, after this step just need to make sure that you need to provision the child nodes itself. And so this is the main configuration that we need to do in the master VM or the master node. Once the master node is being configured, so after this step onwards you can go ahead and configure the child nodes. And once this has been done, next the step that we need to provide is basically just need to make sure, if you're going for multi-node clustering, just make sure that you should have all the IP addresses, the internal IP addresses, or the data center's internal IP address, or what you can say the private IP addresses of the child nodes, that we should have to be taken note. And after the step we need to go ahead and we need to setting up Ambari. So to set up a set of Ambari, to deploy Ambari, what I need to do is basically we need to download the Ambari repository from any of the standard Ambari site or Ambari repository, GitHub repository. So since we are going to deploy Hortonworks HDP, so I'm taking a direct common repository. So what I'm doing here basically for Ambari 2.0 onwards, there is a specific configuration is being there, that's to download Ambari. So let me first download the repo. Paste the link. So the repo has downloaded, and after that what you can do, I can copy this repo within yum repos directory. If you're getting any permission denied issue, make sure that you to perform this with sudo permissions. And next we will refresh this repo for Ambari. So for Ambari 2.0, what I need to do is basically to type yum repo list, which will refresh the Ambari repository. And once it has been refreshed, the next step that you need to do is basically to install the Ambari server. So the steps are for setting up bits of Ambari. Download Ambari repo. Next, setting up, refresh Ambari bits, and next download, install Ambari server. And once you have installed Ambari server, then you need to start the Ambari server and agent. So let me go ahead and install Ambari server. So what I can write is basically yum install Ambari.server. So this command would go ahead and install Ambari server. In this step, just agree to download the keys. So just type Y. And rest of all the steps, just hit enter so that all the default settings would be installed. So it will install all the prerequisites for Ambari like PostgreSQL and Ambari servers. The latest RPM packages would get installed. So once Ambari server has been set up, so the next step would be to configure the Ambari server bits. So once you have, after installation, the next step that would be is basically, after installation, you need to start the services for Ambari. So once all the download has been completed, so the next step would be to install and starting up the services, the default services for Ambari. So here what we are trying to do is basically, after the completion flag has been showing up, we need to start up the services. So just type Ambari server setup. If you're getting error regarding permission, make sure that you are going to do sudo just accept all the default options for all the prompts. Alright, so the last step would be basically to start the Ambari service. So just can write start the Ambari server, type Ambari server start. So it would go ahead and start the Ambari services. That's it. So just give few couple of minutes to start the server, and after that you'd see the flag that Ambari server start completed successfully. So that's all. We are all set to use Ambari to bring up the Hortonworks HDP cluster. So what I need to do now, just can take up, just copy and paste the IP address of the VM, and with that just append the port number 8080 for Ambari. It will take a couple of seconds to boot up Ambari and start the UI services. And once you have done, once you are getting the Ambari console, so just make sure you are logged in with username and password as admin, and then click on sign in button to start operations on Ambari. So this is the Ambari 2.0, which has got the exciting latest features of Ambari. That's Ambari stacks, views, and a lot of independent options for provisioning Hadoop clusters. So first, in Ambari 2.0, this feature is already started from Ambari 1.7 onwards. After logging in through the Ambari portal, we would be able to see that basically the default option to launch wizard to provision the default clusters, the administrators who can manage the cluster, who can access the cluster, and we can manage the customized views for Ambari users. There is a separate options for managing groups and users. For separate groups, like what the specific users having the specific access to Ambari and specific access to HDP services, like we can specify separately users to the user specific accessibility and groups. That's based on the group specific permissions and permissibility. And also we can deploy the views, like views instances, and grant permissions based on the specific views. So for right now, I am being interested to go directly with launch install wizard. So I'm clicking on that for step 0, and here I'm giving the name of the cluster as HDP Ambari. And clicking on next. Here I would be getting an options like to select the stack like 2.0, 2.1 or 2.2. So I'm going ahead directly with 2.2, which I'm trying to install in this step. So it will check all the specific repository. Here in install option, I need to specify the host name. So host name, just make sure that it should be the fully qualified name. That's FQDN. So what I'm doing is I'm just copying the full qualified address. So here also on the VM, just make sure that the host name is being properly configured. So it's HDP Ambari. So just All right. And here you need to give the SSH private key file which you have utilized to deploy the VM. Here, give the name of the user that you have utilized to provision the Ambari. And finally click on register and confirm. Once you confirm, you'd be in the page of confirming the host where your host name would be registered. Alright, so the server has been registered. So the next step, we can go ahead and choose the services and assign the masters. So we can click here next. So since it's a single node HTTP deployment, I'm choosing a single node, and here I'm good to go to start over the services. For HDFS, Yarn, MapReduce 2, Taze, Hive, HBase, Pig, Scoop, Uzi, Zookeeper, Falcon, Storm, Flume, Nox, Slider, Spark, which is recently introduced in HTTP 2.2.4. Apache Spark is a fast general engine that's for large-scale data processing in memory streaming. And Kafka is being there, high-throughput distributed messaging systems, and Ambari matrices, which is very new to Ambari 2.0. It has been introduced in HTTP 2.2.4. It's a system for matrices collection that provides the storage and retrieval compatibility for matrices collected from the cluster. So I'm going ahead and deploy all of the services. So Spark requires basically HTTP 2.2.2 or later. Attempting to install Spark to HTTP 2.2.0 cluster will fail. So confirm that you are using HTTP 2.2.2 or later packages. So can go ahead and provision, because anyway I'll be go ahead and deploy HTTP 2.2.4. and rest of all, it would by default will select the node. If you're going for multi-node clustering, so they would default by default will select that in which node the master services would be assigned. So since it's a single node, so all the master services would be assigned in the single node itself, and I'm clicking on next, and here we'd be assigned to the slaves and clients the individual services. So client will install basically the HDFS client, MapReduce 2 client, Yarn, Taze, HCat, Hive, HBase client, Peak, Scoop, Uzi client, Zookeeper, Falcon, Slider, and a Spark client. So the host is HDP Ambari, and in the single node we are going to deploy all the master components that's to be hosted in the HDP Ambari. And also remember that the other services like Storm, Storm UI server, Nimbus, DRPC, Zookeeper server, Falcon, matrices collector, Spark history server, broker, Kafka broker, and Nox gateway, Apache Nox gateway, all would be installed here in the single node. So we'll go ahead and click on next for customizing the services. So here and here I need to provision the Hive. So Hive here I need to give the password, the database password. And rest of all services just keep it as it is. Then go ahead and configure Uzi. Here also need to give the password for Uzi. And here click on Nox and just give the password for Nox master secret. And once we have given the Nox master secret, you can also check away with advanced gateway log4j files and the files for Nox environment, gateway site, topology details. And finally click on next to provision all of the services. You may receive a prompt, alert prompt, like some service configurations are not being configured properly. So Ambari matrices might not have enough RAM to host the HTTP Ambari. So if you're getting such issues, or if you're getting some of those cases, what you can do is basically just can go back and remove few of the services. So I'm just removing Ambari matrices. And click on proceed. Click on next to customize. Just provide the passwords for Hive server. For Uzi, just provide the password. For Nox, that's all. Click on next. And just go ahead and review before proceeding the final. So here goes my cluster admin name, cluster name, total host, and the bunch of repositories for Red Hat 5 for HDP 2.2, Red Hat 5 for HDP utils, Red Hat 6 for HDP 2.2, Red Hat 6 for HDP utils 1.1.0.20, SUSE 11, Ubuntu 12, services like HDFS, data node, name node, secondary name node, yarn, MapReduce 2, Taze, Hive, HBase, Peak, Scoop, Uzi, Zookeeper, Falcon, Storm, Flume, Nox, Slider, Spark, and Kafka. I am clicking on deploy to start provisioning all of the services. So to go ahead and deploy the services one by one. So in this demo, what we have done, we have deployed HDP 2.2.4 using Apache Ambari, Apache Ambari 2.0, and here the steps that we have done here, that we've been using Microsoft Azure Virtual Machines. So for this demo, since it's a single node, I've taken a single A4 cluster, and after that I need to configure the CentOS 6.5 64-bit Linux cluster to make NTPD services on, IP tables, restart, and generated SSH. Next, just copied over SSH to ID underscore RSA folder, and after that I have downloaded Ambari repo from public repository, then set up Ambari server, configure automatically PostgreSQL DB, and then start finally Ambari server. And once we have done that, next need to open the public endpoint of the VM on the browser and append the port number 8080. So these are the initial steps that you need to do to deploy HDP 2.2.4 or normal standard deployment of HDP Hortonworks Data Platform deployment using Apache Ambari. And next we need to just give once we select the launch wizard options, once we just select the cluster wizard installation, we need to select the stack, just give the name, provide the stack the cluster name, then we need to install options for the which version of HDP we need to want to install, like 2.0, 2.1 or 2.0, and then we need to confirm the host, passwordless SSH authentication that needs to be done, or if you want to go for manual registration of SS for Ambari agent, that's also you can do that for confirming host. Next you need to choose of the services that which needs to be boot up, and then you need to assign the masters and slaves and the clients, and once you have assigned, then just go and customize those services, and finally you just can go ahead and review the services that you have just started. So it will take just around 15 to 20 minutes, just depends on the network bandwidth in the clusters. So that's all for the demo. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will be starting on the next demo just within a couple of minutes. Thanks for watching. Alright, so HDP has been successfully deployed, and now I can click on next and finally click on complete to load the dashboard of Ambari. And here I'd be able to see that all of my services has been started, like HDFS, MapReduce 2, Yarn, Taze, Hive, HBase, Pig, Scope, Uzi, Zookeeper, Falcon, Storm, Flume, Nox, Slider, Spark, and Kafka. So this is the version of HDP 2.2.4 which has just been released a few weeks back, and here are a lot of configurations that we are able to see in Ambari dashboard right now. First, if I go through step by step regarding the matrices, like I've been able to see in the right hand side the HDFS disk usage, like DFS utilized, non-DFS utilized, data nodes which has been running, in live, the HDFS links, name node, data node links, the memory usage, network usage, CPU usage, cluster load, and name node heap memories, being availability, name node RPC, name node CPU, name node uptime, HBase master heap, HBase links, HBase average load, HBase master up minute, that's uptime of HBase master. So since just half an hour's back, the HBase cluster has been booted up. So I'm being able to see the uptime, resource manager heap, resource manager uptime, node manager live, yarn link, supervisor live, and flume live. Also, if I check corresponding heat maps regarding the matrices, like if I want to check the host CPU weightage averages, the IO and HDFS bytes read, HDFS byte written, and corresponding values of yarn garbage collection time. So just being started cluster, so everything has been booted a few minutes back, and these are the corresponding configuration history. And so all of the services right now is being in running state. Now if I just quickly go through Spark, so I'll be able to see that right now, since just booted, there is no alerts. Spark history server is being started, Spark client, just one Spark client since it's a single node. If I just go through quickly into the config section, so I'll be able to see right now in Ambari dashboard, in Ambari 2.0 dashboard, I'll be able to see the various Spark defaults configurations like Spark driver, extra Java options, Spark yarn, extra Java options, Spark history, Kerberos, Spark history UI port, that's 18080. Then the corresponding Spark yarn application master, wait retries, Spark yarn scheduler, heartbeat interval second. In Spark environment, I could be able to see the specific configurations regarding Spark. I could be able to see this Spark Java ops properties that contains Spark log4j properties, Spark matrices properties, Spark defaults, and Spark Java ops properties. And if I want to add a specific property regarding Spark's log4j or defaults or matrices, I could be add over there. So these are the various configurations, and once I make any changes, I could be able to go ahead save these options, and so that it will be added as a new configurations and just being made as a v2, the version 2 of this new configurations. Here are some of the quick links that are available, like Spark history web UI, so I can quickly jump into directly into Spark history web UI. And so web UI, there is being a default UI that has been ported, it's being set up, and I could be able to go through. Now I could have the other services that's been running, like MapReduce 2. I could have services like yarn, and I could be able to check the corresponding configurations for yarn, the yarn matrices. And I could be also able to get the as a quick link like resource manager UI, resource manager logs, yarn, resource manager JMX, and thread stacks. Also the default configuration regarding resource manager, node manager, application timeline, server, fault tolerance properties, etc. So these are the important settings, and we already know from HDP 2.2 onwards where there is right now Apache Nox is being available directly. So Apache Nox 0.6 is being in public preview right now. It's on GA. So I have just configured also during the deployment of HDP, I've configured a Nox master secret key, so that value is being just being specified during the deployment time. And also I have the gateway log4j value. I have Nox environment settings, which is the default process ID directory that var run Nox. I have the advanced gateway side, so these are some of the properties regarding gateway configuration directory, gateway Hadoop Kerberos security path, that's secured path. If it is true, it's true, but it's Boolean flag value, that's false, that indicating that the Hadoop cluster is not protected right now default by the gateway secure with Kerberos. Gateway port number for Nox is 8443, and this is the configuration file. And Kerberos security KRB5 debug is being made as true. So these are the specific details, and if I just go through the advanced topology file for Nox gateway, so this is the advanced topology one. So also in Ambari 2.0 we have just got an additional property for adding a new host directly into the cluster. So since our current deployed HDP edition is 2.2.4.2.2, that's the current one, which consists of total 33 components right now. I've just only skipped the Ambari matrices one. and that one I could be able to add if I have right now in this cluster I'm having 14 gigs of RAM, but to deploy Ambari matrices altogether in a single node, you must have at least of more than 17 to 18 gigs of RAM. So make sure that you deploy all the properties of when you are deploying HDP, all the specific services, specifically all the services along with Spark and including Ambari matrices. When you're deploying in a single node VM, make sure that in the VM, if you are working on single node or which node you have taken in a master, it should have at least more than 18 gigs of RAM. It's preferable to have at least 32 gigs of RAM. 16 to 32 gigs would be better. So here I could have the alerts regarding Storm Web UI. So this status would indicate that if there is any issues regarding starting up the specific alerts and service files. So I have Storm Web UI, I have Flume agent status, I have history server for CPU utilization, I have Nimbus process, I have person supervisors being available, I have supervisor process, I have Storm server process, I have secondary name node process, I have history server latency and data node web UI. So all the services and the last status changes value and corresponding status for those of the services like enabled, it has been mentioned that all the services are currently running. And here goes next the admin section tab, which defines the stacks and versions for Ambari, the service accounts and Kerberos. So let's just quickly click through the Ambari stacks and versions. So here I'll be able to see in the stack tab that what are the services is being installed and what are the corresponding version and status. So I could be able to see that HDFS, MapReduce 2, Yearn, Taze, Hive, HBase, Peak, Scoop, Uzi, Zookeeper, Falcon, Storm, Flume, Nox, Ranger. Ranger is not installed right now in the service in the cluster, but of course I could add it. Just if I click on add service, I can just quickly go through and click over Ambari matrices, so it would be installed over there. Sorry, it could be installed Ranger as well. So I just can click on next, and it would ask your default configuration. You must have an existing MySQL server, Oracle server database to be running on. Ensure that all the access services for DB admin user root, and if you have all the services being set up properly, just can go ahead and proceed with that, so that it would configure for Apache Ranger. So just click on next. So what it will do, it will go ahead and load the services, and it would customize the services, and then it would again review and install the Apache Ranger services. So this is pretty new. These features would not be available if you're still working with Ambari 1.4 or 1.5. This version is pretty much gonna be available. Few of them, stacks and views, was not available as a separate tab in even in Ambari 1.7, but it's a pretty new feature that's being introduced in Ambari 2.0. So you need to provide the Ranger admin user's password. So I'm giving here my default super secret password, and also I need to provide the Ranger DB root password, and to provide Ranger DB password, and finally I need to provide the password for audit DB. Once I've given all of this, I need to make sure that my authentication service port in Unix authentication settings, it's 5151, but of course this is eternal truth that the port number for Ranger is 6080 for HDP. So just go ahead and click next, and finally just can go ahead and click on deploy to install the Apache Ranger service on HDP cluster. So it would go ahead and prepare to deploy, and finally once all the tasks could be completed, it would start installation of Apache Ranger services on this HDP cluster, which is running on Azure Virtual Machine. Alright, so Ranger has been installed. So in this way we could be able to add the services like Kerberos and Ambari matrices as well. And so these are the settings that we could be having for Ambari 2.0. and just refresh the page. So this is the dashboard that we have for HDP 2.2.4, and so what you can see here basically is so this is the dashboard, and so currently with this HDP 2.2.4 edition, if you want to deploy, if you would like to deploy HDP, Hortonworks HDP 2.2.4 using Apache Ambari 2.0, so these are the steps that you need to perform, and there are some new features that is being came up for Ambari 2.0 as well, like regarding service users and groups. You'll be able to see if you click on service users and groups regarding each and every individual services and their corresponding values for those users. And if you click on Kerberos, so you'll be able to see that the corresponding Kerberos security, that's by default it will be disabled, but you need to enable it explicitly. And in the stacks and versions, you'll be able to see that whichever the services regarding with their versions and what are the status of those services, whether it's installed or not installed, along with the description. If you just click on version, you'll be able to filter out those of the services which is being running, which is not running, installed, current, which is being running. So currently this is the HDP version that we are running so far. And if you want to manage any of the versions, so if you just want to leave the cluster management, and if you just want to go to the Ambari administration interface, so you can just go, of course, to the cluster section. Of course, anytime you could be able to back, or if you just go and click and to the admin and click on manage Ambari, and you'd be able to go for the direct Ambari administrations over there. So these are the steps by which in this demo what we have done. We have just deployed HDP, Hortonworks HDP cluster 2.2.4.2.2, which is subversions right now, and you have deployed entire HDP using Apache Ambari 2.0, which is being recently introduced. Apache Ambari 2.0 has been introduced with a lot of new exciting features, and these are the steps that we have been performed so far during deployment. And of course, all the services right now with the cluster is being running on the Apache, exactly on Azure, Microsoft Azure VM, that's virtual machines itself. And the same process would be there if you are planning to deploy it on AWS EC2 or Google Cloud platforms, any of the standard VMs. It's a single node cluster, so all of the services are running in the single node. But if you're planning for multi-node, of course you can make us master node and corresponding separate data nodes itself. So just choose one master node or two master node and choose correspondingly 6 to 8 data nodes itself and throw them on cloud. So that's all about the demo for HDP deployment with Ambari. So I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.